Well, welcome to our first series of breakout sessions. This is room 3, Literacy Beyond the Library, Academic Librarian Instruction in the Honors Program. So if this is not the session you meant to be in, go to the other rooms. And virtual attendees, welcome as well. We'll monitor chat and Q&A, and we'll do questions at the end. But I'd like to introduce Abby Moore and Natalie Ornat from UNC Charlotte, who are going to be leading today's presentation. Take it away.
Thank you. Hi. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining our session. We'll try to stand still. We were just talking about that, but that is not our natural human condition. So if we move a little bit too far from the mic, just kind of move us back. I'm Abby, this is Natalie, and we're gonna talk to you about some kind of full semester teaching that we have done and are going to do. So my background is in classroom teaching and school libraries. I was a New York City teaching fellow. I had no real plans to become a teacher when I was in college, but I became a New York City teaching fellow, taught high school English in the South Bronx for 6 years, and then transitioned to their campus librarian. From there, I became an academic librarian. So.
Hi, and I'm Natalie Ornat. So I'm the humanities librarian at UNC Charlotte. And so my background, I went straight from undergrad to being a teacher in Charlotte through the Teach for America program, which is an AmeriCorps program where they place teachers who really don't have a background in education, which is kind of what they're looking for. So they can shape you into Title I schools, usually schools with really high teacher turnover rates. So I taught at a middle school in Charlotte for 3 years. I got my graduate certificate in teaching while I was a teacher at UNC Charlotte, actually. And then I continued teaching when I was a graduate assistant at UNC Chapel Hill while getting my MLS. And then in my current role, I continue to teach their information literacy research workshops. So Abby and I can continue the instruction work in our current roles.
All right, so before I start talking about the instruction and the information or the literacy instruction that I do, I think we should highlight or kind of talk about the University Honors Program. So UNC Charlotte's Honors College is dedicated to educating and supporting high achieving students. We're also focused on connecting to our community. Students are required to participate in community outreach and service when as they're enrolled in the honors program. And during their freshman year, they start right at the start of their education. They're required to take an first year experience course called Colloquium. And that's where I was able to get involved in the honors program. There's 13 honors programs, the core interdisciplinary UHP or the University Honors Program, and then 29 discipline-based programs in colleges and departments. We have about 805 honors students currently, but we're growing. And I think their goal is to enroll 1,000 freshman honors students next year. So in honors, students are required to take several discussion-based courses that highlight this motto of curiosity, community, and city. The classes are small. They don't often have to take summative assessments like tests at the end of the classes. They explore literature, art, film, and citizenship. They absolutely engage in their community and they get to know the city of Charlotte. They are required to do an undergraduate research project, and they have access to an all honors study abroad program or programs, several of them. So my experience in honors has been teaching I would say 4 sessions, 4 years of colloquium, the first year experience. I've also taught a book club or books and literature and society course. And I taught a film course during the pandemic that was about the mythical hero. And for the last 2 years, I've led a City as Text course, which includes a travel program over spring break. So next spring, I'll teach my 3rd honors course, which will be a City as Text program to Croatia.
My class is teaching, it's through the Honors College as well, but it's also a course in our Liberal Studies program. So this is the university's interdisciplinary program. It houses courses that overlap disciplines and have a focus in critical thinking and communication. So there's a set of courses here that are designed for the general education program. So you have a course in arts and society, Western cultural historical awareness, global and intercultural connections, ethical and cultural critique, and then critical thinking and communication. That last course is actually a course that our Department of Librarians commonly teach research workshops, scaffolded sets of information literacy instruction. But my course is actually going to be under the ethical and cultural critique band. So it's a literature and culture class where we are looking at how literature plays a role in shaping and reflecting and challenging culture. And so there's like 5 courses offered in this band and 1 honors course, which is the one that I'm going to be teaching. And next, Abby's going to talk more about her experience.
All right, so I'm going to focus on the City as Text course that I have taught and will hopefully continue to teach. So this is an advanced level honors course. I've had sophomores in the course, but going forward, only juniors and seniors will be able to enroll in the course. So the course was created using the tenets of the City as Text unit that I mentioned earlier, which is part of the honors colloquium experience. And in that unit in colloquium, they learn about Charlotte and they go out into Charlotte. They have research questions. They've done a lot of pre-searching and that we front load them information about Charlotte, but then they have to go out and experience Charlotte and observe Charlotte to answer research questions. So this class is grounded in place-based learning and includes a travel program. My class does. Ideally a study abroad program over spring break. I say ideally though, because last semester or this spring, I took students to New York City instead of the Croatia trip that I had originally planned because of course, due to the impossibility of international travel during pandemic. So we learn to read the city. The city is our text. And when we get in country or in city, students have to do observational research and participate in experiential learning in order to look for answers to their research questions. Literacy skills are absolutely essential in a course like mine. Not only do they need general information literacy skills to find, evaluate, and make meaning out of information, right? But visual literacy skills, often overlooked literacy skills, are perhaps the most important skills to have when you're in an unfamiliar place, particularly where there may be a language barrier. Those are essential skills that my students need to flourish and succeed. Okay, so as I said, the most important aspect of the course is that the majority of the learning takes place outside of the classroom and is focused around a place. In fact, learning takes place on off the beaten path alleyways and in neighborhood squares, on buses and on trains. It takes place in clock museums. We actually went to a clock museum in Austria, and tattoo shops. We've done that too. on walking tours, in castles and hostels, and even in pubs and cafes. These are the places my students identify as the places to go to observe and read the text. But before all of that, students have to learn about the place, right? They have to read and watch and listen to reliable and credible sources. This pre-searching is like the messy part of class, and it's like a wild time of consumption of information. I provide them with some of the resources, and I lead class discussions at the beginning of the semester. But as we get closer to the in-country part of the program, and you wouldn't believe how fast that program, how that travel comes up as you start the semester and are moving towards it, the course evolves into a place where their interests and what they've discovered about the city drive the discussion and set the tone. Oftentimes, the students come into class knowing they have to identify a research question. And usually the research question starts as something that they think they should research or they should be interested in, right? Like it often follows what their major is or what they think their major might be. But as we work in class, they realize that they can identify or choose questions that really, really interest them. And only then, or then they pare down their interests into like a manageable research question. However, it has to be observable, which is often another challenge that they have to overcome. And we have to rewrite the research question. But only then when they've identified that manageable and observational research question, are we ready to go? So some of the research questions that my students have come up with include what does high culture look like in Budapest and Vienna? How does pet culture in Hungary and Austria differ from that in America? How is Jewish identity portrayed in the built environment in Budapest and Vienna? This was a urban design majors question. What effect do the locations of the third place, which I had never heard of before we talked about this in class, have on the crowd and customers of that place? How does the placement of street art impact its use as a form of political discourse? This was from my class that went to New York City. What professional and non-conventional dance performance opportunities are available in the outer boroughs of New York City? And what does that say about access to dance? And then finally, how does social media impact young adults' perceptions of New York City? Okay, so the learning outcomes are set by the city's text curriculum. And as you can see, there's probably too many, right? That's almost not a manageable list of learning outcomes. So I've highlighted the objectives that I use most to set the learning activities during class and when we're away. Sorry. Often these objectives aren't immediately observable. When they've like met the objectives, it's not necessarily right away observable. Sometimes I observe differences in my students by the end of the travel program, but often it's when we get back and they're reflecting on their experiences that the learning becomes apparent. That aha moment when they make the connection and answer questions is the highlight of the course. And it doesn't matter if that happens in country or in the classroom. Also, Natalie and I both listed some major assignments. I'm not really going to go into the major assignments, but if you have questions about them, please feel free to ask about them at the end of the course or end of the presentation. All right. Okay. So literacy is all over this course. As I said before, traditional information literacy skills help students collect their long list of credible and reliable, popular and peer-reviewed sources that provide background information and context for their research. Those sources also make up their annotated bibliography, which is the research assignment, the academic research assignment that they turn in at the end of the course. So as I mentioned earlier, also the visual literacy skills that are so important to this class. So not only do the students need to know how to read a map, they're also required to submit 2 maps or a map per city based on what they intend to do and where they intend to go during their time away. But they also need to be able to interpret images and signs if and when the language barrier becomes avoidable. And they have to do this while walking in unfamiliar territory. And this is the part of the course that scares them the most. In addition to flying, I had several students who this was their first time on an airplane, which was pretty cool. So they're scared of navigating the public transportation system. I mean, the train was like, it blew their mind. They're scared they won't be able to follow directions or understand signage. They're so super scared they won't be able to understand the exchange rate. This is when we go to abroad, and manage their money. When my students finally figured out the subway system in New York City, I could see their confidence grow and their demeanor change. I mean, honestly, it was a visual change. They stood up straighter, they smiled more. So they were no longer tourists in that city. And they met that objective. They were researchers and they were observers. So just this past semester, I incorporated digital media literacy skills into the course. And that's because I required that the students follow at least 2 social media accounts about New York City right off the bat. We often talked about what they'd seen on their socials since the last we met. One student focused his research on the difference between what he saw on social media and what he actually saw and experienced in New York City, and how that difference impacts people, especially young people who want to move to New York City. He learned a lot about influencer culture. I learned something about influencer culture and lateral reading as he prepared for our New York City trip. And quite honestly, all of my students mentioned the difference between perception and reality during the trip debrief and our reflection. So it's really important to acknowledge that all of my students have come to class with basic information literacy skills. They know the difference between popular and peer-reviewed sources. Most of them had to analyze information presented visually or graphically on their social studies exams, at their state social studies exams. Many of them, thank goodness, were already skeptical about what they see and hear online. So I didn't have to teach them these skills. What I was able to do, however, is create assignments and learning activities that required them to apply those literacy skills in real life, which resulted in giving them those skills value outside of the classroom. And to me, that is another type of aha moment. Natalie?
Okay, this is going to be my first experience teaching a semester-long credit-bearing class. And it's actually not scheduled until the fall. So this is just a caveat that I haven't actually taught this class yet. So I am sure, as we all know, when you're teaching, whether it's one session or an entire course, you're going to learn a whole lot after doing that, probably just from like the first couple days. So I'm sure some of this will be changing. So I'm going to kind of take you through more so my pitching process and then my planning process for the course. And I'll also say that I was really excited to propose a course, not only because I was a classroom teacher, so I really missed having those moments where you're really getting to know your cohort of students and you are developing building relationships with them. But I also thought that as a liaison librarian, this would be a really kind of an interesting way to develop new connections with the teaching faculty that I work with, and kind of be able to put myself in their shoes, and better kind of understand their experience throughout the semester if I was also, leading a course throughout the semester. So I knew I wanted to propose a course, and so I just had to figure out what I was going to teach, right? That's, kind of a big part. So I knew, of course, that it had to fall within the Honors College curriculum, have a focus on critical thinking and communication skills. But it had to be something that I felt really confident teaching, and comfortable as well. So I really had to resist that imposter syndrome where you feel like, what am I actually an expert in, right? And I was racking my brain and I was thinking, okay, well, you take me out to dinner, I will be an expert in that menu before we get to the restaurant. Can't teach a class on that. I think I'm an expert in Taylor Swift discography. Can I teach a class on that? Abby said yes, but I don't know. I don't know if that would go through. And I also wanted to make sure that it wasn't a topic where I felt like I was stepping on the toes of other faculty on campus, and really kind of staying within my lane as a librarian. So the topic that I settled on is something, of course, that is unfortunately having quite a resurgence in popular culture, but something that's been happening for a very long time, which is banned and challenged books. So this is a course description that I wrote up. And so, of course, stories of school districts and libraries fielding book challenges and bannings are, all across the news. I think our students are going to be familiar with this happening. And the ALA Office of Intellectual Freedom, which tracks book challenges across the US, has found that since 2020, book challenges have doubled, and they're currently at their highest rates ever recorded. And of course, these challenges are frequently targeting books that share the LGBTQ experience, and focus on racial themes. So of course, as librarians, we are, on the front lines of this, not only in, fielding these challenge efforts, but also as being advocates for our community's freedom to read and access to information. So the course development process, I really started with building that course description, which you saw on the previous page. So this was really kind of my idealized version of the course, a vision for it. And I included some kind of guiding questions as well. So these guiding questions, a couple of them were, what are some of the common reasons that books are challenged? And what does this tell us about societal anxieties at that moment? What is censorship and what forms can it take and has it taken throughout history? How has censorship been justified? And when, if ever, is censorship justified? And how does reading really shape and challenge our beliefs about the world and our own identities? So kind of, these like really complex questions that you can chew on. That was kind of my starting place. Then, of course, I developed the learning outcomes, thought through some ways to assess those outcomes, both formative and summative methods, and then started to kind of map out some of those key readings, which would be both challenged and banned materials, also reading materials that help provide context to public reception of these books, and academic discourse, of course, on book banning. And since I'm doing backwards planning, really those readings, that content is sort of, what you decide upon last in the design process. So that is still kind of up in the air. And unfortunately, there's a lot of books to choose from that are challenged. So lots to choose from there. So with those key pieces, what I've been kind of doing now and more so over the summer is breaking this up into different units, starting to put it on a semester schedule, thinking about when I'm going to introduce assignments, have those assignment deadlines be. And then once I have that schedule developed, then I can start to kind of do that individual lesson planning more so over the summer. So these are my 4 learning outcomes, and then the assignments that I've developed so far. So most of the course, the grade is going to be based really off of discussions and classroom participation and engagement. But I want the students, I'm going to have self-reflection be a really critical part of the class, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit when I talk about this outcome of improving our critical reading abilities. So they're going to have weekly journal entries. They're going to start off with an essay thinking about the impact that a work of literature has had on them, and particularly also thinking through, the damage and the impact if that wasn't available for them. I'm going to have them do a group case study of a particular book challenge or banning, and have them kind of think through being the different actors in that situation. So being the student, the teacher, the librarian, and the challenger. And then a more formal investigative essay where they're going to be looking at the reasoning behind a book challenge and be able to bring, their evaluative skills to look at that assessment and develop their own sort of conclusion on that. One of the course learning objectives that I mentioned is for students to improve their critical reading ability and to consider how cultural forces are shaping discourse around certain authors and texts. So to be critical readers, we want to be moving in and out of the text to interpret what the text means and how to evaluate how it works as well. So we're going beyond just understanding, the plot and the literary elements to understanding how the work has influenced the greater world and individuals as well. So a key piece of this is self-reflection, because of course our comprehension and our understanding of a text is really connected to our own experiences in life and our own, past readings and knowledge. So, having the students wrestle with questions probably in their weekly journals, like, how did this work challenge your assumptions or expand your understanding? How has your thinking been stretched by this work? And then, of course, context is incredibly important in this discussion. So we not only want to understand the context and the time period in which a work was created and developed in, but we also need to understand the context of the time that it's receiving these challenges. So, an example of this is if we were to be looking at Ibram X. Kendi and Jason Reynolds' book, Stamped: Racism, Anti-Racism, and Me, it would be really critical to understand the challenges to this, to understand what happened in the summer of 2020, the murder of George Floyd, the racial reckoning that happened and is still happening. And then, of course, critical race theory, mis and disinformation around that, right? And also, we're going to be talking about interpretive strategies of reading. So understanding how different individuals comprehend what they read and how that plays a role in their thoughts and reactions to books. And then, of course, digital media literacy. Abby and I are on a committee where we really try to promote the inclusion of digital media literacy on campus. And we're probably the first to tell you that this could be included in any sort of course. But I think it's really helpful for this course, particularly because we are looking at public reception of works. So we're going to be engaging with popular media, with reporting, with public reactions, particularly in an online and digital space. So we want to be strengthening those skills as well. And we wanted to talk a little bit too about how we approach building a classroom and building a class that runs for the entire semester, because of course it's very different than just being, sort of the guest star coming in and doing a library workshop. So what I always go back to is first, I think it's really important to have a sort of teaching philosophy that you bring in. And this is something that, you could bring in to just a one-shot instruction session, if you're doing a scaffolded set of library instruction, or of course in a credit-bearing class. So A teaching philosophy allows you to really reflect upon your teaching values and your pedagogical approach to your work. And I think it's really impactful when you are not only developing lessons to kind of go back to it and have it be kind of your guiding post of what you're developing and planning, but also when you are feeling burnt out or you are feeling a little cynical and you're tired, and you go back to that statement that you read, and it should inspire you and it should re-energize you. So when I taught at the middle school, my whole philosophy was around having students develop their voice and be able to advocate for themselves, for their communities, and for issues and causes that they felt really passionate about, which is something that's been able to kind of see me through in information literacy sessions, but I think also particularly within this class topic. Setting up classroom expectations. A lot of us, when we go into a classroom, we go into a place that already has an established culture of expectations set by another party. So when you're in charge of your own classroom, it's going to be really important to be able to communicate and stay consistent with your own set of positive expectations, right? So, going beyond just having that in the syllabus and really kind of working through and even developing that, co-developing that with students to think about what sort of learning environment you want to create together. I think it's really important to have realistic expectations and also always have that place for empathy, because our students, they go through a lot. They're really busy. They might have family obligations, full-time jobs that you want to consider as well. And then lastly, students learn better in, classrooms where they feel that their teachers value them and where they feel like they have a sense of community. So building that, I know for me, is going to be a priority, probably priority number one when I start teaching. That's something as simple as learning your students' names from day one and trying to use them, or, having students bring their life experiences into the classroom, me bringing my own, and them seeing me not just as that teacher authority role, which I don't want them to see me as, but to see me as a whole person as well.
Okay, so I just want to talk about this just a second. I skipped the slide before, but my teaching philosophy, and I really use this as well to set the tone of the classroom and move forward as a whole class. I did an assignment in my first assignment in my master's degree in education, where I was coming in with no idea about education or teaching, was to write a teaching philosophy. And it is basically, my teaching philosophy was, I'm a guide on the student's journey through their education. And it's basically, it's evolved a little bit since then, but if I think about it and I reflect on it, I'm a travel guide for my students in my city as text class. So it's rang true, and it stays true. But I agree that establishing standard operating procedures for class and in country is such an important thing for students. I want my students to feel comfortable and safe both in class and outside of class. During my travel program, I'm really hands off. I see the students only once a day. They're adults and I treat them like adults. But I know some of them get nervous when I walk away from their hostel that first night, even though they know I'm not staying with them. So we write classroom norms and safety etiquette during the first week in class. And students know that in writing those two lists together, I hope they know, and we always kind of go back to those lists, that I want them to be comfortable and safe in and outside of the classroom. So that aha moment is so important to me in class. It's something I'm searching for in them. Can they connect what they've read to what they observe? Where and when will they find the answers that they seek? Can they provide context to those answers? Have they successfully navigated the subway? Have they found that little restaurant that they heard about on social media? what new skills have they learned? And perhaps most importantly, what have they learned about themselves? Aha moments occur when students are able to interpret meaning from what they've seen, read, and heard. They're about making connections between text and self, text and text, and text and world. That moment can't happen without literacy skills. But beyond all that, I think the sustainability of my classroom environment comes from the excitement the students have to take on the challenges of the course and for finding answers to questions that interest them. And the excitement I have for taking them on this quest that they've signed up for.
Okay, so we just wanted to kind of end and wrap up here thinking about, for you all on Zoom in the room here, thinking about if you wanted to pursue credit-bearing classes and teaching opportunities beyond kind of the typical library instruction that you might do, where you might go and how you might do this. And of course, that's very differentiated to your teaching environment, to the college, undergraduate, or school that you work at. So I guess just some of our recommendations, most campuses have this, but if you have a center for teaching and learning, they would be a really excellent resource to go to, particularly if, you're working to develop that semester-long course, right? Going to, if there's an honors college program for Abby and, doing the study abroad programs, the international office, or really just networking with faculty, right? Because they are the ones on campus who are proposing classes, developing classes so often. So they would be really excellent resources to figure out how you might be able to do this as well.
So things that you can be actively doing as you pursue full semester teaching opportunities is, one thing is to find out if your library participates in the first year experience program. Some libraries do teach credit bearing first year courses in research skills or information literacy. And that's a way to get involved in that, bigger teaching opportunities. Bone up on your instruction skills and get to know the LMS that your university is using. Know the ins and outs of that baby because it is very important. This is not rocket science, but pursue professional development opportunities in instruction and curriculum development. Take webinars, go to workshops, trade in one of those sessions at a library conference to see if you can find or hear from other instruction librarians who have done this type of thing. And this is how it got me, pay attention to emails coming from academic affairs or from faculty outside of your comfort zone or department who are looking for instructors or facilitators. This could be your way in. So that wraps up our presentation. Thanks for attending. And we can take any questions that you have now. All right. Natalie, should we just call on hands? Sure. Sorry, it was Amelia, yeah. Is it? Okay. Yeah, you want to? Okay. Yeah. Mm.
Should I repeat the question to the mic?
Sure.
Okay, so so the question being, if you have a special population, particularly thinking in mind a group of veterans who have maybe been outside of the academic library, academic world for a little while, how to engage them in instruction with information literacy courses. Okay.
Sure. So actually, Natalie and I have both done this type of instruction. It's a different community, but we've worked with student athletes, who are kind of isolated on campus, and they have a first year experience program, and we have kind of been pushed into that program. And one thing that's really been successful for us to get them interested in information literacy, or just interested in reading and processing information, is to make sure that all of the activities are focused on what they are interested in. So we start the class asking very easy question: what's the last bit of news that you've seen or heard about college athletes or college athletics? So we really try to focus that course on their interests. And then we use examples from even academic literature that address sports. Natalie found this great article that I still use. It's called Trash Talking and Trolling. And it's about how athletes trash talk and, which sports do it the most and all that. So just presenting that article, that academic article that's peer reviewed, really impresses upon them that they can research anything that's interesting to them. So that's one thing that I would suggest, is plan activities, find really good examples of something that would be very interested to that population. Heather. So I will repeat the question: how has having librarians out in the instruction program beyond the library helped with relationship building, and helped impacted the library instruction program? Yeah. Okay. Thanks. You want to tackle it?
I mean, I think for me, this is all still like what I assume will happen, since I haven't actually, taught this class yet. I have to always do little asterisks for that. But I mean, I think that as far as relationship building with faculty, I think that for a lot of academic librarians, right, there's this constant kind of pressure of having teaching faculty see us as equals, right? And giving us that same level of respect as other faculty on campus. And I should say that we are technically faculty at UNC Charlotte, librarians there. Yes, different faculty, right? So I think that, I've been trying to kind of, work that into conversations and talk about, the class that I'm planning for, and, caveat for, we can't schedule library instruction for this particular time on Tuesdays and Thursdays because of that. I think just in general, it helps with that, building of showing that we not only are also, researchers and scholars on campus, but we're also teachers, and we also, operate as faculty on this campus. So as far as the instruction program.
So the instruction program is we have a pretty dynamic instruction program. We have about 12 research and instruction librarians who all have assigned departments and who go out into and teach mostly one-shot instruction sessions. We do have a instruction and pedagogy group, which Natalie and I are both on, that sets the instruction meeting. We have instruction meetings once a month that helps set the agenda and the learning activities for that meeting. Now, I will say, and Heather, I'm not sure how being a person, a librarian who teaches full semester courses, I think probably people are really tired of hearing me talk about it. So I don't know if the instruction program is really impacted by it. It is, our dean has set that we impact student learning in a more observable way, I think, and us being able to go out and teach full semester courses is one way to achieving that goal. So.
Good question. Yes, I'll reiterate. Yes. So yes, it's the logistical question of, is this part of our tasks in our job as librarians, or if this is, work that's done outside of that typical day. And they gave us a choice in that. And I asked Abby what I should do. Take them. Yeah. So it's called overload. So technically I'm doing this outside of my job responsibilities. And so, I just need to have that conversation with my supervisor about, since my class is during the middle of the day, how are you going to make up for that time? But in that case, our payment for this is extra.
Yes.
On top.
Yes. Yeah. It seems overwhelming at first, but I'm the type of person, and actually I learned this from my first professor in grad school, is that you need to learn how to, or figure out how to get your work done at work. So I have become a really kind of strict time management person. So I think that if you are interested in doing something like this and you want to get paid extra, which I encourage you to do, is that you kind of figure out how to manage your time in such a way that you're not really doing much extra work outside of work. I work on my lunch hour. I know that's kind of not good for our mental health, but I choose to do it that way so that I am not doing that much extra outside of work. So time management is really important. And our supervisor is really great, that he is super flexible and really recognizes that what we do is part of our job description. It's just the administration where you have to kind of like work with them. So. Anything else? Well, feel free to email us with any questions that you have about teaching in general or teaching full semester classes. We totally encourage you. I encourage you to explore the possibility, because it's fun and satisfying, and it is a really amazing way to build connections with the students outside of your one-shot sessions.
Thank you all.